Ngozi sat in her small room, gazing out the window at the dimming twilight. The silence outside belied the storm within her. She clutched the edge of her scarf, her fingers trembling as she replayed the conversation from earlier that evening. Her father's firm voice rang in her ears. "You will take Adako's place. Emeka's family has agreed to the arrangements." "Why me?" she had protested. "I'm not the one who was betrothed to him." "You are her twin. No one will know the difference," her father said, his voice broken no argument. The Okafor family's wealth and influence must not slip away. They need a wife for Emeka, and this is our only chance to maintain the alliance. Her mother had spoken softly but firmly. "Ngozi, this is for the family. You know what is at stake." Ngozi felt the walls closing in. How could they ask this of her? To marry a man in a coma? To stand in for her sister? She knew her parents favored her sister over her. She was the one her mother gave up at birth. She only came back to them when she turned 12. Her adoptive parents had died in a mysterious accident, and luckily for her, they had willed all their assets to her. Her real parents had shown up with stories about how she was lost in the hospital, and being too young to handle everything, she had given her parents the power of attorney. That had become the new trap, as her father had gradually turned her inheritance from her adoptive parents to his. She had recently found out that she was not stolen from the hospital. Her parents had willingly sold her for money. Now, this. She is to marry a man in a vegetable state. No one knows if he would ever wake up from the coma. Despite the man's betrothal to her sister Adako, the family could cancel the marriage now, given the state of things. But not her parents. Money and power always came first. She glanced at her sister. Adako sat quietly in the corner. I didn't say the word, but Ngozi could see the relief in her twin's eyes. Relief that she wasn't the one being sent into this bizarre arrangement. The following day, the Okafor mansion loomed before Ngozi like a fortress. Its tall gates and sprawling gardens spoke of wealth and power, but to her, they felt more like prison bars. Mrs. Okafor, Emeka's mother, welcomed her with open arms. Her heavily embroidered wrapper rustled as she embraced Ngozi tightly. "You are saving our family," Mrs. Okafor whispered. "Emeka is the only heir. The doctors aren't sure if he will wake up, but we need to ensure the line continues." Ngozi swallowed hard, her voice barely audible. "But he's in a coma. How do you expect?" Mrs. Okafor cut her off, her tone firm. "The marriage is symbolic for now, but if he doesn't wake up, there are ways to ensure we have an heir." Ngozi froze. The implications of those words sent shivers down her spine. The wedding was a subdued affair, held in the vast Okafor family chapel. Only a handful of close family members attended, and Ngozi felt like a ghost in her own life. She stood before Emeka's still form, propped up in a clinic bed with IVs and machines hooked to him, his face peaceful but unresponsive, as the priest intoned the vows. "For better or worse," she murmured, her voice shaking. Emeka's silence was deafening, his mother excited, and her own parents overjoyed as if they had won a lottery. If not that she has to say whatever is left of what her adoptive parents left her. Leaving home and never returning would have been her best decision. She had to develop a new plan, but what that will entail, only time will tell. Life in the Okafor mansion was strange and stifling. Ngozi was given a grand suite next to Emeka's room. When nurses and doctors came and went, she often found herself staring at him through the glass partition, wondering about the man she had married. She knew nothing about him save that he was the heir to the Okafor empire and her sister's husband-to-be. Her parents had ensured she had no contact with him and barely spoke to him for they feared she may snatch him away from her sister, or maybe Emeka would prefer her to Adaku. Ngozi had kept her distance and simply let them be. She went to a different school while her sister enjoyed privileged training, a peg that came with being chosen by Mr. Okafor for her son. Just before they graduated, Mr. Okafor had passed in the same accident that had kept Emeka in the state. But his family kept their alliance. Here she was, the closest she had been to Emeka, wondering who he is. What does he like? Would he be able to tell her and Adaku apart? What would happen if he awakes? What would she do if he does not wake up? Too many questions bombarding her mind. One evening, she sat beside his bed holding his hand. I don't know if you can hear me, she whispered, but I didn't choose this. None of this makes sense to me. Who are you, Emeka Okafor? What kind of man were you before all this? Please wake up. I don't know how to deal with what is going on, nor can I violate you as I am expected to. I am also uneasy about the other solutions to bearing you a child suggested. I don't even know if you would want me. Just wake up, please. Adaku visited Ngozi 2 weeks later, her demeanor uneasy. This is madness, Ngozi said as soon as they were alone. Why didn't you refuse? Adaku sighed, avoiding her sister's gaze. You know I couldn't. I am not strong like you, Ngozi. I couldn't face the burden of marrying a man who might never wake up. Strong? Ngozi laughed bitterly. Do you know what it's like to live in this house? To feel like a pawn in some twisted game? I'm so sorry, Adaku whispered, tears in her eyes. Ngozi turned away, her anger and despair bubbling beneath the surface. Her sister was just like her parents in many ways, always taking the easy way out, falling for anything as long as money and power were offered them. When Mrs. Okafor and her family proposed to maintain the alliance, with more benefits offered, the parents lipped at it and Adaku consented. However, when the reality of the decision dawned on them, they decided to force Ngozi into the relationship instead. The weeks turned into months, and Ngozi began to notice strange things. Conversations among the household staff would abruptly stop when she entered the room. News about what her family was offered for her to marry Emeka had spread. The household staff at Okafor Mansion neither liked nor respected her. They did their best to hide their true feelings to keep their jobs. Mrs. Okafor became increasingly insistent about Ngozi spending time in Emeka's room, even encouraging her to talk to him and play music he liked. One night, while flipping through a book on Emeka's bedside table, she knocked down a diary. She bent down to pick it up but noticed a note in the page that had flipped open. It was addressed to Adaku. Dearest Adaku, I cannot wait to start our life together. You are the light of my world, and I promise to cherish you forever. Let's build something beautiful. The words felt like a slap in the face. Ngozi realized that Emeka had been deeply in love with her sister. What would he think when he awakes to his replacement bride? She thought. Her breaking point came when Mrs. Okafor called her into the study one evening. Ngozi, we need to talk about the future, she began, her voice heavy with implication. If Emeka doesn't wake up, we have options. There's a doctor in Lagos who specializes in alternative methods of conception. Ngozi shot to her face. You mean you want me to have a child using his? She couldn't even finish the sentence. Mrs. Okafor didn't flinch. It's for the good of the family. Your family, Ngozi snapped. Not mine. I'm not some tool to be used. You agreed to this when you married him. Your family bought into this all the way and were heavily compensated for your troubles, Mrs. Okafor said coldly. I didn't agree to this madness, Ngozi said and stormed out, her heart pounding. Despite her anger, she knew Mrs. Okafor was right. Her parents in their greed had agreed to this and had accepted the compensation. She did not know anything about this arrangement until she was dragged into it. The worst part is that Mrs. Okafor did not know she is not Adaku. That night, as she sat in her room, she heard a faint noise. At first, she thought it was the wind, but then it came again, a low groan. Her heart raced as she ran to Emeka's room. The nurses were already there, their voices urgent. "He's responding," one of them exclaimed. Ngozi stood frozen as Emeka's fingers twitched, his eyelids fluttering. After months of silence, he was waking up. When Emeka finally opened his eyes, he was disoriented and weak. Ngozi sat by his side, unsure of what to say. She simply held his hand gently. "Who are you?" he rasped. "I'm Ngozi, your wife." His brows furrowed in confusion. "My wife? I don't understand." "It's a long story," she said softly. "Just rest for now. You need to regain your strength." As Emeka recovered, the truth began to unravel. He learned about the accident, the coma, the desperate measures his mother had taken. When he discovered the marriage, his reaction was a mix of anger and disbelief. "You married me while I was unconscious?" he demanded, his voice sharp. "It wasn't my choice," Ngozi said defensively. "Your mother, my family, they arranged everything." He stared at her, his expression unreadable. "And Adako, what happened to her?" Ngozi hesitated. She didn't want this life, so they sent me instead." Emeka laughed out loud. His laughter was bitter. Of course, always a pawn in someone else's game. His heart ached. He had always known that his mother loved the business and Okafor name more than she loved him, her son. But to go to this extent to keep it was too much. He was not oblivious of what Adako's parents were capable of. He just thought he was different, but here before him was the reality. As the days turned into weeks, Emeka and Ngozi found themselves drawn into a reluctant partnership. They shared stories of their lives, their dreams, and their frustrations. Slowly, a bond began to form, one built on shared pain and a mutual desire to break free from the family's manipulations. Emeka was surprised to learn about how Ngozi's parents sold her at birth and took everything away from her when her adoptive parents died. He couldn't understand the mindset that wrought such wickedness. But one thing he knew is that the heart that does such things does not care for the one it targets. One evening, as they sat on the balcony overlooking the gardens, Emeka turned to her. "Do you ever think about walking away from all this?" he asked. "Every day," she admitted. "But where would I go? What would I do? Plus, I still have to take my parents' business away from them." "We could live together," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "And don't worry, I have my ways and people who would help me take back everything your adoptive parents left you." Ngozi's heart skipped a beat. "Do you mean that?" "Yes," he said firmly. "Let's rewrite our story, Ngozi, on our own terms."